Welcome to the QP Diaries Podcast. This podcast is all about inspiring and empowering the next generation of QP professionals and future quality assurance leaders in the UK pharmaceutical industry. On every episode, I'll be speaking to QPs from across the industry, and our listeners will have the opportunity to hear their stories, their expertise, and we are going to be discussing topics to foster growth and learning to help you develop your career as a qualified person. If you're passionate about quality assurance and want to learn from some of the very best QPs and thought leaders from across the industry, then this is a podcast for you. I'm your host, Dal, founder of AssureBio, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. We are proud to have partnered with NSF as a sponsor of the QP Diaries podcast. Becoming a qualified person is a significant commitment of time, effort and resources, and the QPs trained by NSF are widely recognised as the very best in the industry, with no other training provider matching their experience or success rate. If you're interested in learning more about NSF's QP training course, you can find the link in the show notes. For now, we hope you enjoy this episode of the QP Diaries podcast. Hi Damian, welcome to the QP Diaries podcast.
Hi Dal.
How are you doing today? You okay?
Very good, thank you. And yourself?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, it's been a busy morning so far, but yeah, looking forward to our conversation. Of course, we had a little sort of a preparation call a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, we've got a good conversation to take place today. So we've got a lot to cover. Of course, your journey to becoming a QP, and then bringing it to present day as well, and talking about the rapid advancement in technology and what impact that will have on QPs as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So, well, to get straight into it, then, Damian, do you want to sort of share a journey of yourself becoming a QP and a bit of an introduction?
Certainly. So, my name's Damian Larrington. So, I started my QP journey with a company called Allergan. I worked in global pharmaceutical development client compliance there, supporting global clinical trials. This is where I was first introduced to the role of the QP, and it was my boss that said, I feel like you might have the right mindset and temperament for QP and it might be a good career choice. So I attended my first QP module, which was roles and professional duties, just to get a bit better understanding of the QP role. And when I returned from that, I said, yes, I think this is something I would really like to do and, continue my studies in. So I did perform my QP modules during that time, and that led me to working for a company called Hospira. So that moved from clinical trials into commercial supply, a lot more fast-paced environment and a lot more risk-based decisions, and completed my QP modules. Hospira was acquired by Pfizer, which eventually we became part of the Pfizer EU release team, and that's where I completed my QP Viva in 2021. And that was my first acting as a QP for Pfizer. And then more recently, I have moved back into the world of IMP, and I am a QP named on a license in both the UK and EU. So during that time, I completed the QP modules and the education sides and working and interacting with other bodies like PQG and PHSS, attending conferences, learning and obviously networking. But I was fortunate with those jobs to have a lot of risk-based decisions to make, see a lot of real-world decisions made by QPs. We also had multiple QPs on our licenses, so it was good to get difference of opinions, different backgrounds, different histories to support that journey. This really helped me with preparing for my QP Viva by having that real-world experience.
Yeah. Okay, and how did you find the actual sort of training process? I mean, did you face many challenges on that journey?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenge was always work-life balance.
Okay.
I was very fortunate when I completed my modules. I working for a company, and my sponsor was very helpful in saying, we need to make time for this. But at the same time, there may still be work to do in the evenings, or there may be work to do when you return, because other people were picking up work whilst I was out for a week on a QP module. But the hard facts are there's still work to be done and there's still activities to be performed.
Yeah.
it led to me sometimes not getting that work-life balance correct. So, I sort of say now where I'm sponsoring people, I gave up a bit too much, and that was not necessarily the right thing. So whilst there may be some sacrifices along the way to study and to progress whilst working, which is difficult, probably don't give everything up, because you still need that slight mental break from the studying, the work, and everything, and the pressure. So it's something that I've sort of passed on now as a sponsor, to say work-life balance is still important, because there's a lot of work to do around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it sounds like what inspired you to go down the route was the people that you worked with, and as you say, your mentor. So I'm assuming they were pushing you along that journey.
Yes, indeed. I was quite fortunate. So my sponsor was Stefan. He was a friend since university.
Mm-hmm.
And then his boss, Henrik, they were both of the view that, was a right fit to become a QP.
Yeah.
So they felt very passionate about it. So they were very good in making sure I'd got structured approaches, regular meetings, interacting with other QPs, and just making sure that I had a lot of options to progress my studies and to learn more about how to act as a QP.
Yeah. Yeah. So you learned a lot from the mentors around you then.
Absolutely. And they encouraged me to speak to other QPs and mentors. So, whilst they were my sponsors, there was also people that we interacted with, other QPs that we knew, and through the network to say, go out and get help and speak to these people and work with them and get some Vivas from them.
Yeah.
There's never sort of ours is the only way that works. It was always go out and find other ways that might work for you as well.
Yeah, that's it. So you had your internal network and the support they provided, but they also then they sort of pushed you into the external network of QPs to get support from other parties as well.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's something that we all kind of forgotten about in the recent years, with obviously things like the pandemic, where we haven't been able to interact.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's become important to say, yes, it's good to interact, get back together, get those networks established, get people talking again. You realise that there are people that will share issues with you as a QP that may have that one bit of knowledge that you're seeking to make that decision.
Yeah. Okay. And your experience, is it mainly IMPs, or I know that you say you've got commercial experience as well?
It's probably about even at the moment. So so I had my start with IMPs and then was very much commercial. But now, having returned to IMPs, it's probably about equal.
Okay.
They each have their challenges. I do like working in IMPs, and particularly around the new development of medicines and new treatments that you see. So early phase trials and seeing what is coming in the future, and new drugs that may help people. But at the same time, commercial has its balance, that you're feeding the current pipelines, so supplying to hospitals. And we were lucky, one of the groups I worked for, supplied a lot of hospital medicine, anti-infectives, antibiotics, and life-saving medicine. So again, it was a pleasure to be part of that, to make sure that those supply chains are always running smoothly.
Yeah. Okay. And you touched upon that now you're a sponsor, so you're on the other side of the fence, so you're supporting a lot of sort of trainees and maybe junior QPs. What do you think are the most pressing challenges for either a trainee or a newly qualified QP, and what they face in their first initial phase of their career?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think one thing is definitely quality risk management, is that people struggle to risk assess processes appropriately, make those decisions. And I think this is now showing with advancements in technology, and with that you get both globalization and advancements in technology. So what I mean by that is people are operating globally. They're bringing more e-systems, and with it now we're seeing AI. And I've been to some conferences, people are talking about AI, and there's a mix of fear and excitement, I would say. And I suppose people don't always realise we already have a lot of AI built into systems that we use day to day already. Maybe a small level, just make basic decision-making programs, but it already exists. So I think one of the challenges will be for them is to say, if I'm operating in a global system or an how do you approach that? How should that be validated? Should that be allowed? And if so, what would you be looking to include within those audits or assessments? So I think ultimately it always comes down to quality risk management. Everywhere I travel, everywhere I go, people have their view of what that looks like, but often it's it used to be described in my training as risk assessment by sat nav. You know where you want to go, so you point it that way.
Right.
Whereas obviously the whole approach was risk assess it and see where the risks point you, or whether it's even sometimes to say actually that's too risky to pursue that project, so we say.
Yeah. So what advice then would you provide for those individuals?
I think that the advice it comes down to is being again, getting out into these networks, speaking to people, going to the conferences, learning about these new changes, things that are being implemented all over the world, because, you understand it more, there's less fear, there's more understanding, there's more likely you'll come to a point of being able to either implement or at least have a comment of why, because that's the other thing. You can say, oh, I don't like that, or I don't think we should use it. And the next question is, well, why? And you've got to have a suitable conversation, a suitable answer for that. And I think this is where people need to, really get educated in what's changing.
Yeah.
And then also then get educated in how to risk assess that and work that into pharma. If the decision is it doesn't belong, that's fine. But again, you have to justify that. Why have you made that decision? But I see it myself that I don't think people are. To me, it seems that we don't get as many people released to go out to conferences, to go out and learn, to go and find out these things.
Yeah.
And it's very much, we've got internal things or internal training. More so big pharma, having spent some time in big pharma, it's, we'll do it internally. We've got internal.
Yeah.
But those people have never left the business. They've never been outside. So you're going that you're only getting one point of view at this point, which again, I think is very difficult. And that's one thing I say to my trainees, even with myself as their sponsor. I can give you my opinion, but it still doesn't even mean that my opinion is right or my opinion is the only one. You have to go out and explore with other people and become educated in what's going on in the pharma world.
Yeah. So do you think that comes down to the individual themselves pushing their company to provide them with the opportunity to go to these conferences or on different training courses so they can obviously provide self-education?
Yes, I think there's an element that people say, I would like to do this or I would like to do that, but there isn't a plan. So with my trainees, I always say, put it together in a plan, describe it for me, let's show the business why this will benefit them. And I mean, it doesn't have to be 80 pages long, but just a couple of emails. And then for me as a sponsor to say, this is what's going to benefit them and benefit you and benefit the patient, because ultimately that's what we're doing it for. Everybody's 9 times out of 10 says, oh, that's a great idea, let's do that. It's difficult if people don't have necessarily the soft skills or they're not used to interacting with people in the corporate environment. It can be challenging because, unfortunately in quality and QPs, we don't tend to always have a senior title or something that allows us that entry into the leadership reviews. So that can be challenging. But yes, I think it's all about putting that together in a plan to show people this is why it will benefit you and benefit the business. And then people are more likely to get on board with that.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I mean, I was showing some data on sort of QP retention recently, and that went into a lot of detail around career development and maybe dissatisfaction from QPs that they're not getting enough support in terms of helping them develop, and maybe just sort of pigeonholed into the batch release role, which of course it has to take place. But also at the same time of that QPs want to learn and they want to develop.
Absolutely. And I think, as you say, there is that pigeonholing of QPs. And unfortunately, people say, oh, you're a QP. And they see that as that's the end of your career. You've pinnacled at QP. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. Like, that's great. But there's people that become a QP and say, great, I've done 5 years as a QP now. And I'd still like to be on the license, but actually I'd like to get into project work, leadership, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you say, we don't think about, oh, well, let's backfill this person or let's move them into a new role. It's just, oh, you're a QP. We don't have to worry about your career development because you're already a QP.
Yes.
You've done that, 2, 4, 5, 10-year stint to become one. That's it. So your career's set at QP. And so, we do see that a lot where, not everyone, myself and my sponsor, we love being QPs, but we also enjoy doing auditing, other work and managing teams. So you say, sometimes you want to add on to it. And even to the point of saying some years you want to do a bit more QP work than others. Sometimes it's nice to take some of that pressure away of saying, it's not me having to make those decisions. I'm going to go off and work on a project and then I'll come back to it in 6 months. You can't run a QP at Redline 25 years releasing. I think about that. There's these firms that I audit and they say, oh, this is the QP. And you look at this person and you think, you've been chained to the release desk for 20 years.
Yeah.
And unfortunately for them, that's also when mistakes happen because there's a complacency by the company, and that's not fair on those QPs then.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that. We're taking a moment to share a message from Catherine Kay, who is the Executive Director at our sponsor NSF, where she highlights the benefits of their training program for trainee QPs.
Our trainers for our courses are experts. They're experts from industry, have had many years' experience and bring a wealth of knowledge to our training courses. We also provide Viva preparation sessions for them every month where they can practice answering questions in a group scenario. NSF have a long-standing partnership with the University of Strathclyde. So not only do our courses meet the requirements of the QP study guide, but they're also taught at a master's level. So that means that people can go on to and acquire a postgraduate certificate, diploma, or even master's with the University of Strathclyde. Then you can go to our webpage, so nsf.org, and we have a whole page there set to our qualified person training, so you can read more there.
And you touched upon it in terms of the rapid advancement of technology. And one thing that we wanted to discuss today is that the current study guide the current study guide may no longer be as relevant as it used to be. So from your perspective, what are the key changes that you've observed in the recent sort of changes in the landscape for QPs, in particular with the rapid advancement of technology?
Yes, I mean, again, it is only a humble opinion, but having, been through Viva and going through the study guide, obviously there's a lot of relevant information, but there's also, I feel, there may be some room for some additional. And I think this comes down to what I see with, electronic systems, EQMSs, globalization and AI. It might be that it's not quite ready to add it now, but there needs to be a consideration, I think, for these things of saying, these advanced technologies, because when we look at some of the assessments we've done recently where people are looking for new systems, everyone has an element of AI in it. Everybody's looking at ISO standards, cybersecurity, unfortunately, people don't always turn to the IT department. They turn to the QP and say, is this okay? So there's definitely feel there needs to be, we talk about things like computer systems validation in there, and obviously that's an expectation in the study guide. But I think we're getting to a point now where in the near future, we've got to consider perhaps giving a few more bullet points in these areas, because it won't be long, in my opinion, you're not just always going to have small companies, paper-based systems. Everything's kind of being driven to these electronic and cloud systems, and with that brings its new challenges. So I think we've got to embrace that, because as much as we would like to hand it to, say, an IT specialist, I think a lot of companies are always going to come back to the QP and say, get the QP to audit, get the QP to validate it or sign off on it. So I think we just need to think about how we can better prepare some of these trainees, because, as I say, it may impact me, but I'm thinking about someone who's just about to start their QP journey next week. And in, let's say they do a Viva in 4 or 5 years' time, I think the landscape's already going to be very, very different.
Yeah. I think obviously we mentioned the word rapid. So from what you've seen, the sort of adoption of AI and automation, I mean, do you believe it's going to be taking place that quickly and impact the role of a QP?
I believe so. I mean, I can only talk to experience. I audit, and unfortunately audit quite around the world. And when I audit, I see people that have already implemented it. And I've seen facilities where they're trying to validate robotic lines. And with that, there is an element of AI managing and a full manufacturing of that run. And people are, as I say, it comes down to trying to validate it. And I think that's the key word. Even the people that are developing it are trying to say, what parts are relevant, what parts are not? Do I need to take a different approach that doesn't currently exist in pharma? And that's kind of what I'm seeing, is they say we're trying to validate it, but they perhaps need a new guidance, a new standard, or something that can point everyone in the right direction. But I've already been to sites where I've seen it. I mean, it isn't new technology in the sense of robotics, and you see these automated warehouses. We've all seen it on the TV, little robots running around dropping things off. But I've actually seen evidence of that now for manufacturing medicines, of saying robotic arms and AI, manufacturing. So from that sense, it already exists in some countries. So whether we have it in the UK or Europe is almost irrelevant, because you're sourcing active ingredients, excipients, materials from those countries. So it's already impacting you. And this is where I think it's going to impact, particularly around things like audits. And again, just understanding that technology. It's easy to say, Annex 16, appropriately trained individuals. Well, is the robot appropriately trained? It's like, where do you draw the line? Are you saying that the people that qualify and validate it and do perform those checks, they're training? But is there a need to look into how that setup is done? How is that coded even? And that may not be a job for the QP, but do you need a deeper dive into how these things are set up? So it already exists. Is it going to be released next week? I don't believe so. But the fact that it's already evident, the fact people are talking about it, the fact that people have invested money in it, and people don't normally start that investment to that level if they don't have an intention of making it part of their regular setup.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's quite interesting that you're seeing it already, obviously in different parts of the world, but there'll probably be a lot of people listening to this who obviously don't have access and are not seeing it right now. I mean, going back to advice again, what would you recommend? Because I know that it's a different mindset to accept the rapid advancement of technology, AI, as it may impact the role of a QP. And for trainees, what would you recommend to them?
I think the recommendation is, we've attended, for example, like making and distributing Pharma, which I know you've been to. It's a free to attend conference, and you have people speaking there on things like AI and advancement technology. So I'd always say get out to the conferences, particularly when they're talking about those kind of things. I would say people should be having that conversation in their companies, whether that's with leadership or IT department, that, do we know what we're using? Do we know, have we validated appropriately? What would happen in this instance? Because it's just a question. And if the company says, well, I don't think it's an issue for us, that's fair enough, but at least have those questions. I think as well, not just AI, but any topic. I work, as you know, with the PQG, and we always say to people, contact us. We have generic emails, and the same a lot of these professional bodies, APPI, PHSS, any of these. If you send an email and say, we've been wondering about this, a lot of them will take that and go, we'll find someone with an expertise or as close to an SME, and we can arrange a discussion about that at one of our conferences. They're all looking for what is people's topics, and if there's enough people asking for it, one of the bodies usually says, we can do a day on that, or we'll add that in. So I think it is when, we say to people, let us know what you want to hear. We do listen and we do take it on board. So I'd say always and again, same to the joint professional bodies, we have the joint professional bodies meetings every year, and we have people that run them, and you are contactable. Ask for the things that you see as risks or that you want to learn more about, and over time people will make that happen, I'm sure.
Yeah. So do you think there needs to be more conversations around it? I mean, is there more promotion of these conversations, which may not be there right now?
Yes, I think that's it. I think it's more discussion points. Again, I see at Making Pharma this year, it's going to be discussed again, and sort of the other view of, filling the roles that AI can't fill. And I think that's another, conversation of how do we work together with this?
Yeah.
Because, so many countries are already implementing it. It's kind of too late. We've got to make our decisions. And the decision's yes or no, or we accept it or not. But we need to document that, make those decisions, because before long, my concern is that people will say, oh, I don't want to use this, forgetting that it's already been used, and that batch that you're sat there, an element of that has been manufactured, and the background quality systems or e-systems or the manufacturing program has an element of an AI in it, and it's too late then. That batch is sat ready to go to hospital. So it's just sort of being prepared that it doesn't suddenly sneak up on people.
Yeah. So there's obviously a resistance still that I see as well, which is fairly visible at the moment. But as you say, these conferences are talking about these topics and being quite vocal about it. I suppose going back to the role of a QP and in terms of sort of quality leadership and maintaining compliance and patient safety.
Yeah.
How do you believe, a QP professional can balance that approach? Because probably that's where they may be resisting against it's against GMP. What do we do here? It's the patient at the end of it.
Yeah, and I think it's taking what we already have, validation guidance and computer system validation guidance, and saying, well, what can we add on top of that? And again, this comes back to risk assessing. It's new technology for people, even those that are using it, we're still developing it. And it's about risk assessing it and saying, how do we approach this and how do we evaluate it as things change? And it's the robust risk management says to you, well, I've risk assessed it. Here are my risks, and those are what I'm going to focus on top of my standard validation package. And then I think it's coming to a point that you're happy that AI exists as a tool, but we can't have an AI QP. No one's going to accept that. The QP role exists. As I said, I've always been proud to do it because I like the fact that you're accountable. It's none of this, someone in a room somewhere pressed the button, released the medicine, and people were killed. It's an accountability to say we're protecting patient. So I think it's on the QP to say, look, I'm always going to be here to review this, but I need to define what is it I'm reviewing and what is it we're taking responsibility for. This also comes back to, again, talking about audits. It's relevant because I'm finding that companies aren't always resourcing, and it's never been that's not new, but I'm finding that companies aren't resourcing the audits, aren't providing the money for quality to do those audits. Particularly, I've seen it in big pharma, we'll do it remotely or we'll do a risk assessment. And he's saying this is why it's important to visit these sites, go and see it, understand it from the people that developed it. Because as I say, the answer may still be no, but at least then you will understand what you're saying no or yes to, and getting your hands on those data packages and the change controls and the validation that they've already done to say, does that even sound acceptable?
Yeah.
Because the more that you do that, the more then, as I say, you can go back to the bodies, go back to the guidance and say, can we add extra bits in as needed?
Yeah. So it comes back down to the understanding and the knowledge base then around the future anyway, and also maybe the mindset.
There's knowledge and understanding definitely, which is for any new topic that comes up in pharma. That's not new to AI, obviously. But yes, it is that. There's a mindset of this is. I hear it all the time in pharma. It's this is the way it's always worked, and it's like, yeah, that's fine. But I always counter that with, we used to cut people's legs off without anaesthesia, 100 years ago. So I'm glad that we changed when someone said, I've got an idea that we can make this better. So there doesn't necessarily have to be a change overnight, and give people support. But I think this is why I keep thinking about bringing it back to people like the professional bodies, like the guidance, industry bodies and guidance, because it helps people come together on the same page, helps people to put their own input on it of, as you say, sharing concerns and then saying, are these concerns, can they be mitigated, accepted, or should we, as an industry, still be saying a hard no on it? Because that's the other thing, if you put it all together and the industry says it's a hard no, then at least you know the position, and then you'll have to make changes in the way that we adopt that, or which companies we allow it. Because obviously it comes back to, if it gets serious enough and you say, well, we're going to propose that becomes part of guidance, then you can say, well, sorry, we can't accept something that has this level of AI in it, and that may be the decision further down the line. But again, it's so early days with everyone.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of get to those decision points, I think.
Yeah. Okay. And but bringing you back to the sort of the premise of the QP Diaries podcast and for trainee QPs then. So based on everything that you said today, what would be maybe your top advice to anyone thinking of going on the journey to becoming a QP right now? As you say, if they were starting it next week, how would you advise them?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I always say to people, think about are you the right person to be a QP? So in your own mindset and how you make decisions, are you happy to deal with risk-based decisions, quick decisions, a level of stress in your job? A lot of the other things around that, the education, you can teach people, you can teach someone to do it. But it's like, you've got to be happy that you learn. So if you've decided and your company has, you're the right person, start to get comfortable, with risk-based decisions. So we say about getting involved with deviations at work, leading risk management. And then when you're preparing as you're going through your journey, once that kind of educational side's done, as you prepare to the Viva, you've got to think about how you articulate those answers, because that's another struggle that people have, is how do you articulate that? Well, you can practice that at work. How would you have this discussion, package it up, and then give that to your line manager, your leadership team, your sponsor? And then the one thing I feel that helped me the most was going out and actually vivering with people. So this is where we come back to the network is so important. I do Vivas for other people's trainees and they do it for mine, and you have that network, and it's having awkward conversations with people you don't know very well, because guess what, you're on your Viva day, you shouldn't know those three people or shouldn't have any connection to them, and it's a spot chat, and they can be as direct as they want and select different questions. So the more that you have a knowledge base, you've got to make those decisions. Once you've got to a point where you feel you can make decisions based on information that's given to you, there's the scenario-based questions, get out and do as many Vivas as you can get people to do. Preferably, obviously, sponsors and people that are familiar with it, or, people that might be ex-assessors. But just get out and have awkward conversations with people, get them to ask you their worst nightmare at work and say, well, what decision would you make? And I feel that was probably one of the greatest things that helped me towards passing my Viva, was being able to articulate those difficult decisions.
Yeah, I hear it quite a lot in terms of just a networking piece, especially amongst trainees, that, if you're not networking amongst your peer group who are probably going through the same challenges you are, then it may not end up well in terms of the preparation for the Viva. So as you say, have awkward conversations, which no one likes.
No, exactly. We don't like it to begin with. So you sit there and you I'm sure we've all been on courses where they do icebreakers and go and say hello to someone, and everybody's panicking. So you say that's 10 times worse when you walk in that room and there's three unknowns that start quizzing you about highly technical scenarios. So the more you can deal with that, I think, that pressure and that mentality, then the more prepared you'll be for that Viva.
Similar to your advice on going to conferences and obviously networking at conferences, where you probably will just bump into random people, but have awkward conversations with them, and you never know where that connection may lead, especially if you're in a peer group of QPs.
Yes, and then again, I know myself, I've got a couple of groups on WhatsApp that are with other QPs I trained with or QP connections I have. And the question pops up on there, oh, I've just had this today. Anybody had experience with it? And, the trainees can have the same, I encourage people to sort of do that every day. You could say, look, let's post the question of the day. Everybody go off and do an answer.
Yeah.
But it just gives you a chance to, as you say, constantly interact and answer questions and get used to it.
Yeah, brilliant, Damian. Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing all that information. And just to finish it off, you mentioned that you're a part of the PQG, and I believe there's a conference coming up.
Yes. So I'm currently vice chair of PQG, and we are having a one-day conference, which is essentially celebrating 50 years since the inception of the QP into UK and EU law. So we're holding that on the 18th of June. So this will be in Milton Keynes. We're just about to update the website with further details. And the idea is we're going to take people through the journey of that 50 years with discussions from QPs from each of those eras about their challenges.
Yeah.
And then end it off with current guidance and where we expect the QP to be in the coming 5 years. As part of that, we're inviting people like yourself and other training providers and supporters of QPs to exhibit on the day as well, so that, again, we get some of these networking and discussions going in and around the main talks.
Brilliant. Yeah. So that'll be updated on the website soon. So, by the time this is released, it'll probably be live. So
indeed.
Everyone will have the details and ready to book their place. Really looking forward to that.
Thanks very much. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's good to get everybody around and get some discussions flowing.
I think that's it. Yeah, just getting everyone into one room, and obviously it's a celebration as well. So
yes.
Brilliant, Damian. Yeah, well, that's it for my questions today. So thank you so much for being a guest on the QP Diaries podcast. Of course, as you mentioned, you network a lot anyway, so you're happy for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn if they have any questions for you.
Absolutely. Please reach out to me, and also via PQG as well. So again, if anybody has any questions or requests for support, let me know, and we'll do what we can to support with that.
Brilliant. All right. Excellent, Damian. Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time, and you enjoy the rest of your day.
And you. Thanks, Dale. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
A huge thank you to our special guest and to our listeners for tuning into the QP Diaries podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the show. As the founder of AssureBio, we created the podcast to support our wider quality assurance community, which aligns to our dedicated offering as a recruitment agency to the pharmaceutical and biotechnology industry across the UK. We have over 10 years of experience exclusively focused on recruiting senior quality assurance leaders and QPs. If you want to learn more about AssureBio's recruitment services, or if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, then please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you.